Morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking Dini, John, Jen and the team and also the department for their help in organising this. We're fairly interwoven with the governance around the NBN here in the local community in Townsville, the Broadband and the Tropics Committee, which is your executive steering committee here, and several of the subcommittees. So almost daily we've been involved, and obviously with our main partner, Townsville City Council. I'm going to run through a very large presentation very quickly. I am going to leave the pack here if you want access to it. I'm here all day, so if you want to grab me and have a chat about stuff, feel free. By way of perspective, this program of works, this construction of the NBN, is by scope, technology, a whole range of metrics, extremely complex. It's larger than the biggest fibre build of the two builds in the United States, one being Verizon and the other being AT&T, Verizon being the largest. So it is a larger build than that in the United States. At the other end of the spectrum, with a very good network, running interesting applications and attracting a whole range of investment into this segment, is a Singapore build. So again, to give you a different perspective on the scale, the scope of the build and what we're dealing with here. Now, don't get too lost in this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It just gives you one slice or one view of the fibre deployment. I'm going to give you two views today, but this is the first of those two. So what you have is we start rolling out here in Townsville, and we've done that. We've completed our first release site in Actonvale, and actually one of my colleagues just went out to check the Rodden and Roping for the second and third sites, and we're about to announce other sites, and I'll go through those in a moment as well. So what you have here on your left through to my right is a typical property, a single dwelling unit or a multi-dwelling unit. Multi-dwelling unit could be a building like this, a campus, an aged care facility, Stockman's Mall out there near Actonvale. They're multi-dwelling units. They've got to be connected to the local network, with fibre. Now the Telstra deal, which cost us $9 billion and about a 2,000 word legal contract, which took forever to get sorted, gives us access to, as I said, a range of infrastructure, both pit and pipe, exchanges, systems and people for the next 34 years. Now, where we can, we're going to run the fibre through your existing Telstra conduit if it's underground. Some of those conduits will need to be refreshed, but where we can, we're going to run the fibre through that. In some cases, we'll run, as we have here in the first release site, the fibre in an aerial mode, so it'll go from the poles. Now, at the end of the whole national build, 25% maximum will be aerial deployment. The rest, 75%, will be terrestrial or through the existing Telstra infrastructure. We will have to refresh a lot of infrastructure though, and we realise that. Then you get to the local network, which is down the streets, and you can see that as you drive through the first release site here in Actonvale, where we have poles with our fibre, which sits higher than traditional HFC cabling. We sit in the low voltage corridor, which is only about 600 mils below the power. There's another corridor, which is the comms corridor, which is under that, and that's where you'll see the larger in diameter HFC cable. So even though that pole will be running fibre, we still need to connect the poles using a distribution network. So in some cases, you'll see us coming down the streets here as we go through Townsville, in some pockets doing both above ground and underground work. We then go to our first point of aggregation, or the first switch, if you like, in the network, coming from the property. Now, by the way, the whole network from the property through to the last green box there, which is a very large modified Telstra exchange, is passive. There is no power through it. There is power at the very property end and power at the very last exchange end, but it's a passive network that can operate underwater. It's glass, it's fibre. So first point of aggregation, so this is where all the voice and data traffic from your business or your home gets pulled together, and we switch it. Now, basically, you've seen probably some of these driven around the Actonvale area. They look like this. They're a fibre distribution hub. They support, with scope for growth, around 288 properties. So just going back, that's the first point of aggregation. Then we move into the distribution network, all underground. Then into the first sort of aggregation node called the fibre access node, which is, again, the two big green boxes are basically Telstra exchanges that we've gone into, stripped out, grown racks up, cables, cable trays. We've had to adjust the power, security, and a whole range of things. Now, in some cases, they're not ready. Where they're not ready, it takes us 18 months to make good. So as we've gone around the country, and by the way, we've only got access to all the data and all the Telstra infrastructure outside of our first release sites and second release sites on the 18th of November when the shareholders gave us access by way of the vote. So we now have access to all those facilities and all the data, and we're validating our national rollout plan. The national rollout plan we will table, so we will give you a 3-year forward view of how we're going to build the fibre and the fixed wireless network in February next year. So let me tell you, there are a number of cities, towns, locations, stakeholders across this country knocking our door, going to Canberra every day, trying to get ahead of the rollout deployment plan. You're lucky, you're right at the front end, and when I explain the scale we're about to invest in here, you'll understand why you've got sort of a first mover advantage here. So the distribution network, as I said, connects to the first green box, and then through a transit network to the aggregation node, or the last point of the network, which could also be a thing that we call the point of interconnect. That's where it basically hits the domestic and international telecommunications world. Now, again, in prioritising how we deploy this thing, we need to design it based on the availability of the transit network, sort of the red one here. A lot of that does not exist around the country. The backhaul network is almost finished nationally through the Next Gen program. We also need to make sure that those exchanges are in place and the buoys are there as well. So there is an engineering sequence to this. We also have to overlay the fact that redundancy has to be built in at the property level, at the street level, between the switches, between cities and around the country. So it's not just too dissimilar to power in that there has to be redundancy at every level of the network. So that just gives you a quick overview of the mechanics. Sorry, wrong way. See, now this is another view. Again, I won't spend a great deal of time on this. Two interesting points up here. There's no bit stream erosion in the distance from that cabinet that I showed you. Look. So in current arrangements from the exchange out over copper, the bit stream deteriorates, as we know. It's wet, moist, it also deteriorates. There's a consistent bit stream going through the glass of the fibre. What this is showing is just another view of the same slide. So this is our units of build, if you like. A fibre distribution area, that's that little round beige box in the middle there, FTH. If anything, that's what you've got to remember, the fibre serving area module. That's the unit by which we build this network. It's a unit that I take the planners out to sit down with council to say, should we move our street this way to the left or that way to the left after they've done the desktop analysis. So they come up with a rough footprint of where we're going to build by a pocket of 3,000. So the fibre serving area module, or FSAM, is roughly 3,000 properties. It does change when you get to a campus-like environment like JCU or Laverick Barracks, but it is around 3,000 premises. That then builds into a larger area. Now the FSAM, as I said, will sort of work with council and other stakeholders to nominate, to move it one street this way, one block that way. And then basically we will advertise those maps as we've done on our web and in the paper, and that's how we'll roll out through our construction. So FSAM by FSAM we'll build out Townsville. And this is how we'll do it. For the first FSAM in the Activale area, it's pretty much activated now in commercial service with, I think we're on about 3 retail service providers of the 28 we have signed on, yet to issue pricing. It takes basically on average to build that FSAM, a pocket of 3,000, 12 months, and that's the split of the activities there. So you've got 3 months of taking a high-level design and then doing what we're doing today and over the break here in, over summer here in Townsville, doing the rod and roping and testing the infrastructure availability of Telstra here for our second and third release sites, Gulliver, around that area. Then we've got a whole range of remediation in Telstra. Then we start what is a 7-month construction phase. So that's boots on the street pulling the fibre. It takes 7 months to basically build the 3,000 connection. And then we are activation and testing of the network.